In a dramatic escalation of its conflict with the Australian government, Facebook has now blocked all media content in the country. Australians woke up to an empty news feed on their Facebook timelines today after the social media giant escalated its dispute with the Australian authorities, this over paying for content produced by news outlets. Australia's government has been quick to react, calling the move heavy-handed and wrong. Listen in.
Facebook was wrong. Facebook's actions were unnecessary. They were heavy-handed and they will damage its reputation here in Australia. Their decision to block Australians' access to government sites, be they about support through the pandemic, mental health, emergency services, the Bureau of Meteorology, were completely unrelated to the media code, which is yet to pass through the Senate.
Meanwhile, the localised ban has affected several Australian emergency services. Pages that carry warnings about COVID-19 outbreaks, bushfires, even cyclones have been rendered blank. Fire, health and meteorological services around the country were also experiencing problems with their Facebook pages, which are regularly used to issue emergency warnings in the disaster-prone country.
The fact that there are organisations like state health departments, fire and emergency services and so on who have had their Facebook pages blocked, that's a public safety issue. I've spoken to Facebook this morning and said the government expects them to restore those pages as quickly as possible. There is great responsibility that comes with being a platform that, as the Digital Platforms Inquiry said, has over 17 million Australians visited every month.
And for more on these developments, Professor Terry Flug, Australian media advisor, is joining us from Brisbane, Australia. Thanks very much for speaking with us here on WION World is One. What is your reaction to this move by Facebook?
Well, I think it's been extreme, to put it simply, that Facebook and Google have indicated for some time now their dissatisfaction with the code that has been proposed by the Australian government. But this week, the two companies took very different paths. That Google has announced a variety of partnerships with Australian news companies through its Google News Showcase, which I think is very reasonable accommodation. Facebook has used what some have described as the nuclear option of demonstrating that it has such power over information in Australia that governments have to bend to that power, otherwise they will hold them hostage.
Right. This comes after Facebook has already outlined its plan of action when it comes to Australia's clampdown on its functions. What do we expect to happen over the next few hours and days? Do we expect the Australian government to reach out to Facebook or vice versa? Where do you see things going from here on?
Well, I have to be very careful that I can't be a commentator on what private negotiations, but certainly it came as some surprise to the government, who thought that they had had more productive conversations with Facebook around this. What I do think is that this is a looming public relations disaster for Facebook in Australia, and that the longer this goes on, the more likely it is that Australians will support the government around this. And it need not be that they support the government more generally, but I think there is a very strong sense, I would say about 3 to 1 among Australians, that national government should not be held hostage by big tech companies, and that there are legitimate concerns about the power and reach of big tech and its impact on other industries such as news and journalism, and that it is entirely appropriate for governments to take action around that.
This ban also affects the pages of the emergency services, which has far-reaching implications for the people on the ground.
Well, it certainly does. And even within media organisations, for instance, in Australia, the Special Broadcasting Service, Australia's multicultural broadcaster, has Facebook pages in over 60 languages, all of which have now been cut off. So all of those communities, including the very sizable Indian community in Australia, have now had resources that they've been very reliant upon cut off seemingly arbitrarily around a matter that they would feel should be a matter for negotiation between a big tech company and a government. Look, global businesses operate in all sorts of spheres around the world, be they banking, aviation, health, finance, information technology and social media. And in other industries, it's an accepted proposition that global companies need to adjust their operations to meet the local requirements of the country in question. The idea that Facebook somehow sits outside of that ecosystem, the idea that it is completely unaccountable to national governments, is something that I think is not only a concern to Australians, I think it should be concerning citizens around the world, because if they can pick off Australia, they'll pick off other countries.
Indeed. Terry Flug, thanks very much for joining us with those perspectives and for sharing your time here.